We're doing something a little bit more serious today. I know that at the beginning of this lockdown, I said that I would focus on more positive things and I would try to make more light content every day. And it has been, for the most part, it has been a good run. I think that we've managed to make a lot of positive content with, one or two mishaps here and there. But today, on Friday, Yawmul Jum'ah, I think that it's important to highlight something serious. Yesterday, it was brought to my attention, our attention, whatever you want to call it, a series of just tweets that were doxing people in Kuwait for apostasy. And I don't know if the gravity of that is lost on some people, but in Kuwait, apostasy is punishable by imprisoning and or death. Even if not by law, it could be undertaken by the mob. And I think that, that kind of action taken by certain people could be really, really detrimental to the people who were doxed. I genuinely hope that in this time that those people are not in danger and have not been reported and have not been found by the Kuwaiti police or by possibly more volatile people within the country. I'm not entirely sure how to address this. I never know how to address this. As much as I call myself an activist and I do a lot of protesting and I do a lot of speaking publicly or otherwise, it's always difficult for me to talk about stuff like this because I really can't understand the gravity of it. I've never lived in a country where you could be punished by death or by lifelong imprisonment for something simply that you believe in. And it disturbs me and upsets me that that is something that continues to go on. This kind of idea is something that I was only aware of in fiction. It's something extremely Orwellian, and it was never something that I thought until I started doing this was a real thing. And it's scary and it's really, really, really disgusting. So I really, really hope that all of those people who were outed are safe. This is not the first time in this month that such a thing has happened. About a week ago actually, there was a Tunisian trans woman who was outing gay people in her country, and she was calling for them to be killed, for the country to take action. And I've never witnessed someone shooting themselves in the foot so badly. As a trans woman, where do you get off doing that? It baffles me that that is something that people want. Pure, animalistic, barbaric harm and death on others. It is something that I do not understand and I can never condone. But getting away from all of that, I wanted to cover this today because tomorrow's video is going to be a bit more humorous and we are going to talk about these things in a slightly more lighter fashion, but I wanted to address the gravity of it here and now. And the user who exposed these tweets, these doxing tweets, actually had a thread of people who she wanted to highlight, and I wanted to make a video, and I asked her if I could use this thread, and she said absolutely, of course. And she actually linked me quite a few other threads. So this video is just going to be me reading some really horrifying stories. So if that is not your cup of tea, please do feel free to leave. I'll be back tomorrow with something more light and positive. But I do really, really think that this is something that isn't being talked about enough and needs to be talked about more, and it's just really, really scary. So her thread starts by saying, an extremely short list of Iranians that the Islamic Republic has killed in the past 40 years. Please share this, it matters more than you think. And I will leave a link for her profile and also her tag in the video and in the description below. It is her pinned tweet, so I would really advise that after this you go and check her out, follow her, and also share this tweet because it needs to be talked about. The first person that she has listed is Nikita Esfandiari, who was aged 14, shot in the head during the protests in November 2019. Her family wasn't charged for the bullet like all the other families because Nikita was a minor. The next person is Pouria Bakhtiari, shot and killed during the November protests. He had a message, "Do not let his voice die." And there's a video attached. It's just a message to the people of Iran, him expressing how awful things have been since the Islamic regime and wishing things would get better. And there's also a video of him. No, I won't be putting these in the video just because I think that it might be too much for some of the viewers, but it's a video of his dead body and how his life was ended, and it's really brutal. The next person is Amir Hussain Sadeghi, a genius student and researcher who had designed a cheap water desalination, appeared on TV for his work. He was killed by Khamenei's forces in Kharaj. The regime had then demanded money from his family for the return of his body. A clip of his TV appearance. Of course, the regime tries its hardest to erase not only their lives but also the accomplishments and legacy of our people. And
16000 مرکز آبشیرین‌کاری در حدود 150 کشور دارن فعالیت میکنن که روزانه حدود 20 میلیارد گالن آب رو دارن شیرین میکنن. واسه اینکه توضیح متد رو بدم.
It's a video of him presenting his ideas for a cheap way to desalinate water. I don't know anything about that. He was definitely a more informed man on this than I am, and it's a shame to lose someone like that who is really trying to make the world a better place. Continuing, January 2020, Iran shot down a plane of 176 passengers flying out to Canada. It took the Islamic Republic days to admit what they'd done. The families of the dead couldn't even mourn in peace. Candles lit on the streets for them were stomped and destroyed by Revolutionary Guards. January 2020, at the beginning of this year, Pune Gordi and Arash Pourzarabi, newlyweds who were killed in the flight. They were amongst the 174 passengers. Somaya Shahbazi, executed for killing a man who was trying to rape her. In 1988, about 30,000, probably more, political prisoners were executed in the span of 5 months, some as young as 13 years old. There were so many executions taking place that the right bodies couldn't even be returned to the right families. A group of dead bodies would be buried together in a ditch, and the dead's family would be told their child's body was most likely in X ditch. The families of the executed also had no right to have big funerals. If you questioned the massacre in school or at work, you'd be reported and taken the next day. Atife Sahale, I'm so sorry if I can't pronounce these names. I'm not Iranian. I'm just reiterating and reporting these things that someone else has documented. Executed at 16 for adultery and crimes against chastity. By adultery, they meant the fact that she was raped by a 50-year-old man for 3 years, and by crimes against chastity, they meant being seen with boys alone in their cars or on the street. Her rapist was only given 100 lashes and was released while she was hung in public. Her body went missing soon after and was never returned to her family. In this thread, there are also clips of female prisoners explaining how virgin girls are raped by guards before being executed so they didn't die as virgins and wouldn't enter heaven. The next person is Farzad Kamangar, a primary school teacher who wanted to teach Kurdish, his mother language. He was executed without a shred of evidence against him after being accused of collaborating with Kurdish opposition groups. There's also been the execution of Baha'is, who are a minority religion. They're an offshoot religion of Islam, but they are not considered Muslims and they don't call themselves Muslims as far as I'm aware. But these minorities are persecuted in places like Iran. The lives of Baha'i have been in danger ever since the regime came to power. And there is the story of a girl, Mona Mahmoudinezad, executed at 17 along with her dad, 9 other Baha'i women, all refusing to denounce their faith. We also have the story of Yusuf Nadarkhani, detained and given the death sentence for converting to Christianity from Islam and for protesting the mandatory Islamic teachings in school, demanding that children should be taught their own faiths by their parents. And then we have Rehan Jabari, executed for killing a man who was trying to rape her in self-defense. She was kept in prison for 8 years, tortured and beaten, and finally executed despite the UN and other human rights activists fighting for her life. Neda Aga Sultan, shot by a Revolutionary Guard for participating in the Green Wave protests in 2009. People got a hold of her murderer, but they let him go because they knew he wouldn't face any legal consequences for her death. She became the pin-up girl for the Green Wave. Dilara Darabi, accused of killing a relative at 17, later confessed she took the blame for her 19-year-old boyfriend, who was the real murderer. She thought she wouldn't be executed due to being a minor. Legally, the parents of someone on death row should be notified 48 hours before the execution, but Dilara was hung a few hours after her parents had visited her. She phoned them saying she can see the hangman's noose, they're going to execute me, begging her mother to save her. The phone was snatched. When her parents got there, she was already dead. Shahla Jahed, famous footballer's mistress, accused for the murder of his wife. Later she confessed. She was asked by the footballer, the first suspect, to cover up his crime, falsely confess to his wife's murder so he could be set free and free Shahla as well. As the victim's husband, he had the power to either let the murderer, his wife, live or be executed. After Shahla took credit for the murder, he completely turned his back on her and voted for her execution. Sattar Beheshti, a blogger who expressed his opinions against the regime, arrested on charges of actions against national security on social networks. Police told his family to pick up his body a few days later. No one knows how, when, or where they killed him to this day. Zahra Kazemi, freelance photographer, arrested while taking photos from a gallery of families of prisoners in Evin prison. Initial reports show that she had died under extreme torture, rape, and beatings by prison guards. In November 2019, Iranians rose up once again and were protesting. Around 1,500 people were reported dead, 300 died during the first week. Iranian authorities pretending to be the first aid helpers entered a university and arrested 30 to 40 students, and no one has heard of them ever since. She's also attached a video of the Revolutionary Guards blocking the way and trapping people in the middle of the street. Iran still executes 500 to 900 people per year, still tortures prisoners, still imprisons non-Muslims and political activists, wastes our taxpayers' money, so Iranian taxpayer money, to fund terrorism. The words are always responded to by a noose or a bullet. Women are forced by law to wear a hijab. Women can't get a divorce unless their husband agrees. Girls are forced into hijabs at the age of 6 as a part of their school uniform, and so much more, but no one talks about us, no one hears us, and we are constantly skipped over. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Iran had the highest amount of executions, second to China for decades, while China's population is 1.3 billion and Iran's is 38 million. So when I say this is an extreme short list, I mean it. If you read this all the way, please check out this thread as well. And we are going to have a look at this thread also, just so we get the full lowdown. Borhan Mansournia, a young doctor shot in the head by Khamenei by the regime, bless your soul and path. Perdam Jafari, killed by the regime in Fardi's Kharaj. Then we have Amir Hussain Abbasi, murdered by the regime in Zanjan. Farzad Ansari was assassinated by the regime during the protests in Behbahan. Mohammed Hussain Ghanvati was also killed. Hamid Rasuli from Galshar Kharaj of Iran. Rohullah Nazari Fatabad killed in Sirjan in the SE province of Kerman. Mehdi Nikoi Ali Abadi, they took his lifeless body away from his mother. Yuns Izati from Hermanshah. Mahmoud Dashti Nia from Bahbahan in Iran. Mehrdad Dashti Nia from Bahbahan. Daniel Ostovari killed in Mariwan, Iran. Shahram Moini, father of 2 daughters, killed in Kharaj, Iran. Jamal Tojareh from Javan Road, Iran. Behruz Malaki from Sanadaj, killed in Mariwan, Iran. Shahu Validi, killed in Mariwan, Iran. Ehsan Abdullah Nijad, a young hairdresser who, in the hope of overthrowing the mullah's regime, offered his life heroically in order to free his nation. Kaveh Mohammadi, killed by Khamenei's mercenaries. Majid Hashimi, father of 2 young children, was killed by Khamenei's mercenaries in Shiraz, Iran. Mehdi Demi was shot in his abdomen in Shahryar, Iran, and underwent a 24-hour-long surgery where he passed away in the hospital. Among those killed by Khamenei's mercenaries was a young Christian man named Ashur Kalta from Urumiyeh, Iran. Sayyid Muhammad Hussaini Tahai was shot in the head in Shahryar by the regime. The family got the body back to bury him if they promised to make it quiet and not have any proper burial or memorial time. Mehdi Papi from Kharaj, another young Iranian who was murdered by the regime these days. Hamza Savari, 22 years old, from Ahvaz, was murdered by the regime during the protests. Nadir Bijzanvand, shot to death in Kermanshah by the regime mercenaries. Hamid Rasuli, murdered on the streets of Kharaj by the regime during the protests. Sajjad Bagiri, born in Kermanshah, was assassinated by the regime during the protests. A young father whose child now lacks a father for this regime does not understand that people do not want to live in misery. This is Pezman Galipur, shot in the head, shot to death in Shahrak-e-Andish. Omar Salehi, a 21-year-old university student, shot twice and killed in Fardis, Iran. Bahman Reza Jafri, murdered in Shiraz. 19-year-old Reza Mozami from Kharaj, killed by Khamenei's mercenaries. Sayyid Ali Fatuhi from Ardabil, a detained protester in the city of Mashhar, was killed under torture in prison. 35-year-old Hamid Sheikhani, father of a 7-year-old child, was arrested in November 17th. His family was told to collect his body yesterday, and that was on 24th of November of last year. Amineh Shahbazi was out to buy medicine when a person next to her got shot at the Iran protests. She then wanted to wrap the wound with her scarf when herself got shot in the neck. At the morgue, they said they could not deliver the body. 59-year-old Mina Sheikhi was killed in Tehran during the Iran protests in the past few days. She was from the southwest of the city of Saqqez, and had come to the capital to visit her daughter. Navid Behboudi, killed by the state security force in Shahr-e-Gods. Ibrahim Muradi was shot and killed by the regime forces in Javanrud, Kermanshah province, western Iran, during the Iran protests. Mehrdad Hisabi from Shijan village of Rusht was shot in the head by regime security forces. His body was transferred to his hometown village but was later seized from his mother and family. A poster announcing a memorial ceremony for Mustafa Farzami, killed by the regime security forces during the Iran protests in Kermanshah, West Iran. He laid to rest in his hometown. Hamid Rasuli, next to his wife. He was killed by 2 bullets in Golshar, Karaj, by Khamenei's mercenaries during the Iran protests. 16-year-old Reza Nisi was shot and killed by the regime security forces in the southwest city of Ahvaz on November 16th, 2019. 25-year-old Hamza Savari was shot and killed by Iran security forces in the southwest of Ahvaz on November 16th. He was going to get married in a few more days. Civil engineer Hassan Tavusi from Kian Shahar, Iran, was killed by Khamenei's mercenaries with 2 sniper bullets fired from long distance, hitting epigastric and his flank region. Hussain Karimi was killed with live bullets fired by plain-clothes mercenaries of Khamenei during the Iran protests. Nikita Esfandani, she was only 14 years old, shot in the head on November 16th in Tehran's Satarkhan district. Her family was told, since she's a minor, they don't have to pay for the bullet. Welcome to Iran under the mullahs for 40 years. 13-year-old Amir Reza was shot with live bullets by Khamenei's mercenaries during the Iran protests. Her Azar, she was a nurse working night shifts in a hospital in Kharaj. She was shot in the heart during the nights of the Iran protest and left 4 children without a mother. Rahim Abadi was a bodybuilder who defended the protesters and eventually embraced the bullets of Khamenei's mercenaries with open arms in Kharaj. 17-year-old Sahsan Abdi Vand was killed by security forces in the central city of Isfahan during Iran protests. Another minor killed by the Iran regime. 20-year-old Mohammad Reza Jamshidi was shot with live bullets and killed by Khamenei's mercenaries. 26-year-old Poya Bakhtiari from Mehershahar was shot with live bullets by Khamenei's security forces. He was attending the protest with his mother and sister, who witnessed his last breath on this earth. A poster announced memorial ceremony for Mohammed Hashamdar, who was shot to death by the state security forces in Behbahan, southwest Iran. Another minor confirmed murdered by Khamenei's mercenaries. 17-year-old Mohammed Berihi was shot and killed on November 15th, on the first day of the Iran protests in the northwest city of Ahvaz, and this was also in 2019. Murtaza Sadeghi Nader got shot in the chest and died during the Iran protests when a resident of Kharaj, who was hospitalized earlier due to illness and was shot on his way home. Due to intimidation and pressure on the family, no other information was given. 33-year-old Amir Hussain Kabiri was killed with live bullets by Khamenei's mercenaries during the Iran protests in Golshahar Kharaj. Another young soul who got killed was Yusuf Ebadi from Mehershahar, who got targeted by IRCG forces and shot to death during the Iran protests. Another young soul from Shiraz confirmed killed by Khamenei's mercenaries during the Iran protests. 21-year-old Reza Jamshidi was shot with multiple live bullets on Bahonar Street on 16th of November 2019. He had just finished his military service. Another Iranian woman confirmed killed, Azadeh Zarbi from Shahryar, who was targeted and shot with live bullets by Khamenei's mercenaries. She was 28 years old. May God rest her soul. Mahnaz Mehdizadeh was killed by Iran regime forces in Kharaj during the Iran protests for freedom. Ibrahim Mehdipur, an army officer who was shot to death by the state security forces while trying to defend the protesters in Fardis. 28-year-old Mohsen Jafar Panah was shot and killed by the state security forces in Islam Shahar. 21-year-old Milad Mahogegi was shot and killed by the state security forces during Iran's protests in Shahryar. 17-year-old Amir Hussain Dadvand was shot and killed by the state security forces during Iran protests. Ahmed Gorbani was shot to death by the state security forces during the Iran protests in Isfahan. 21-year-old Arsham Ibrahimi got stuck in traffic. His father told him to leave the car and walk home. He was shot to death by the state security force on his way back home. Ali Reza Enji was shot to death by the state security forces in the Sadra district, Shiraz, south-central Iran. Ali Sartipi, 22, was shot and injured in Malard, Tehran by the state security forces on November 17th, 2019. He was taken to a hospital in Shahryar but died from injuries the next morning. Farshad Hajipur was shot and killed by the regime security forces during the Iran protests in Mahshar. 17-year-old Ahmed Ja'valeh was shot to death by the regime security forces in Shushtar, southwest Iran. 26-year-old Reza Hassanvand was shot to death by the regime security forces in Shahryar. Another 17-year-old confirmed killed during the Iran protests, Mohsen Mohammedpour, who was a labor worker since childhood in Khorramshahr. The regime security forces attacked and severely beat him on November 16th for protesting. While in coma, he died a few days later of head injuries. Mehdi Nikoui, a 20-year-old law student of the first to be injured during the Iran protests. He was removed from a hospital by intelligence officers who handed his body over to his family a few days later. 17-year-old Ali Reza Nouri was shot in the head by the state security forces during the Iran protests. The regime had killed several miners in recent protests and has to be held accountable. Amir Hosseini Sadeghi, a genius student who had designed a cheap water desalination, is amongst those killed during the Iran protests by the regime security forces in Kharaj. The regime now demands money from his family to return his body. Majid Sheikhi was killed by security forces in Tehran during the Iran protests. Now the regime is claiming he was a member of the Basij parliamentary forces and was killed by protesters. They even photoshopped him in a Basij uniform. Golnaz Samsami was going to work and noticed the nearby Iran protests. She rushed to the support of someone wounded when she herself was shot directly in the head by the state security forces in Shahryar, Tehran. She had an 8-year-old child. Ismail Allah Qoli was killed by the state security forces in front of his shop in Baharistan, Tehran. The authorities forced his family to commit in writing not to hold funeral and bury their loved one in Hamadan. Hassan Sahre was shot to death by the regime security forces in Malad. 15-year-old Mohammed Dastan Kah confirmed killed by the special Pasdaran unit of Iran's regime police during the Iran protests in Sadra, Shiraz on 16th of November 2019. Over 1,000 protesters are killed by the regime. They do their best to force families not to reveal the deaths of their loved ones. Another child confirmed killed during the Iran protests. 17-year-old Arash Ayubi was shot to death by the IRGC Quds force in Javan-Rud, west of Iran. The Iran regime have killed at least 22 children during the recent protests in Iran. Bahman Reza Jafri was killed by regime forces in Shiraz, Iran during the November 2019 nationwide uprising for freedom. Bahman was named after his uncle, who was executed during the 198 massacre of 30,000 political prisoners. Another woman confirmed killed by Khamenei's security forces is Shabnam Dayani during the Iran protests in Behbahan. The number of Iranian victims, including many women, are increasing day by day as more families provide information regarding their lost loved ones. 25-year-old Tahir al-Khamis was killed by Khamenei's security forces in Mahshar, Iran during the Iran protests. This child lost his father. She was tortured to death by the Revolutionary Guards, who later threw her lifeless body outside her father's residence. Her name was Halima Samiri, who was arrested during the Iran protests in Abadan. This 28-year-old man was thrown in Ganandam in Mariwar. His family identified him with broken hands, legs, and a fractured skull from a gunshot. His name was Arshad Rahmanian. It's a tough read, but there's so much more. There is so much more. This same user actually sent me 4 different threads to read from. This is the next one, which she posted on the 25th of February. And she says, this regime kills Baha'is, Kurds, Afghans, apostates for sport. In November 2005, Ayatollah Ahmed Jannati, chair of the Council of Guardians of the Constitution, disparaged Zoroastrians and other religious minorities as sinful animals who roam the earth and engage in corruption. When the Zoroastrians' solitary parliamentary representative protested, he was hauled before a revolutionary tribunal. Zoroastrian activists who protested the theocracy's excesses are sent to Tehran's notorious Evin prison on charges of sedition. At the Ayatollah's instigation, Iranian media characterizes the followers of our ancient faiths as polytheists and devil worshippers. The municipality seeks to lay a highway through the Zoroastrian cemetery outside Tehran. Some schools and devotional centers in other Zoroastrian strongholds such as Yazd and Kerman have also been notified of pending annexation. Communal gatherings are routinely monitored by fundamentalist Muslim authorities who allege that Zoroastrianism threatens national security and subverts the Islamic Revolution. Only about 90,000 now remain in the country of 83 million citizens and fearing persecution. Many do not readily identify themselves as Zoroastrians. This is just the tip of the iceberg, by the way, where all Iranians and all live together peacefully. All these cute rainbows and unicorn threads you make will not hide your support for the regime that is destroying our country. Iran is beautiful, so are Iranian ethnicities. We have a beautiful culture, breathtaking cultural sites. The only problem is the fact that your kind is occupying your homeland. And there's also this thread, which is unfortunately a thread of people who have been hanged and suspended. Teenage dancer Rehan Jabari was arrested in Iran. She used to record dance videos in her bedroom and upload them to her Instagram with 600k followers. 1,500 other protesters were killed by bullets either to the head or heart, chest over the span of 1 week. Pregnant women were shot to death by security forces in Saveh in the Iranian protests of last year. Human rights lawyer Nasrin Sotoudeh who defended women prosecuted for removing their mandatory headscarf, sentenced to 38 years in prison and 48 lashes in Iran. To those who argue it is not a symbol of oppression, it is at least a symbol of Nasrin's. 1 year ago, this brave woman, Vida Movahed, stood on a utility box, tied her white headscarf to a stick and waved it to the crowd as a flag in protest against the compulsory hijab on Revolution Street. Her arrest spawned scores of similar demonstrations that still continues. Yasaman Aryani, sentenced with her mother to 16 years in prison for crimes like handing out flowers to protests against the compulsory veil. Progressives in the West should be supporting their fight against theocratic oppression. This really breaks my heart. The police force tackles down a young woman in Ray, Iran because she is not wearing a headscarf. This is what big government looks like. We must stand with Iranian women to fight for their freedom. I'm sorry, I can't read anymore. It is disgusting and appalling that this is something that is happening in the world and very few people are talking about it and very few people are taking it seriously. I just don't understand this fixation on minor issues here in the West when we have such major issues going on east of us. I would like to... I'm kind of at a loss for words. I would like to invite everyone who is watching this and everyone who's aware of this information to share this information and get the word out. This is something that needs to be heavily protested. In this day and age, people are still being killed for the things that they think, for the things that they wear, for the things that they do to even save their own lives. And it is disgusting and horrendous that we let this continue while we sit here on our Western pedestals pretending that everything is fine. Everything is not fine, and we need to do something about this. I don't know what I can do, but I hope that this at least does something. I hope that it informs some people of the horrible things that this regime is doing, and we need to spread this message. As someone who has left the faith and has experienced, comparably minor ostracism, even though it is something major to go through as a human being from my family in a Western country, I could not imagine living in an environment where you are constantly in fear, where you are constantly have to watch your back, have to remember that no one around you or anyone around you could report you at any minute and you could be shot down and not even delivered to your own family. They could never see you again. Not alive, not even dead. I am really flummoxed. I don't know how I'm going to get on with the rest of my day. But I thought that this was really, really important to do, and I don't regret it in the slightest. And I hope that this, for those of you who were unaware of this, opened your eyes to this, and for those of you who were and are fighting against this, I hope that this in some way helps your message. And I just want to extend a hand and congratulate all of those people who gave their lives fighting against this horrible regime. And I also want to congratulate those people who continue heralding them as heroes and talking about them and keeping them alive in memory and continue to fight against this regime. Thank you for watching this video, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow.